Thinking Native, 11 Insights for 2011, with your host Saul Kropman from The Digital Edge.
My name is Adam Whitehouse, previously the Executive Creative Director of Stonewall. Now, as part of Native, I'm the Executive Creative Director of Design.
What does that mean, and what's your role?
So what it means is my role is a lot more focused, which is actually amazing. Previously, I was responsible for quite a wide variety of things, even the technical side of the business, and now with all the amazing people that have joined this bigger animal, I'm predominantly responsible for the design side of the business, which is actually my strength, and which is my background. My entire career has been based on design, so that's what my responsibility is. What that actually means is I've got a team of visual designers that I need to lead, I need to motivate them, I need to inspire them, and I need to make sure that the work that we put out is as incredible and as amazing and as world-class as possible.
You mentioned visual design. Your title is as creative director. So where does creative fit in? What does visual mean when we're talking about the digital space?
So how we've broken up the two roles. The other executive creative director is Angus, who's responsible for concept. So the creative side of the business is broken up into those two things. The conceptual side of creative is something that has traditionally been lacking, and we're putting a very, very big emphasis on that as part of Native. The design side of that is where the look and feel of a particular idea actually comes in. So Angus and his team are responsible for actually coming up with ingenious ideas, whereas we're responsible for actually giving those things a look and feel, and for making them tangible.
When you're doing that, what kind of references do you use? How do you decide what's going to dictate the visual appeal of something? Obviously, the concept is part of that. But other than that, how do you work out where you're going to go with your visual direction?
I think there's a lot of things that play a part in that. So obviously, the brand is pretty important. It's kind of like right at the center of all of that.
Lots of white space.
Yeah, lots of white space. Make the logo as big as possible, and yeah, I mean, there's lots of rules that govern brands and branding, and CI guidelines can, be hundreds and hundreds of pages long. But ultimately, what we're trying to do, in terms of coming up with visual design, is we're trying to design something that appeals to a particular target market. So we need to understand who that particular thing that we're doing is for. We need to know what would appeal to them, what wouldn't appeal to them. We need to know what will really get them going. So I guess that's really our primary starting point: understanding the brand, understanding the audience, understanding what the objectives of that particular piece of work are. If the objective is to just communicate something very cleanly and simply, you don't want to throw a whole bunch of visual design whiz bang at it. It needs to be pretty clean and simple. So objectives obviously dictate the overall approach, and obviously we want to push out work of international standards. So we look at a lot of references and we set the benchmark. Whenever we attack a new piece of work, we look for the best possible thing out there within that particular sphere, and we try and improve on it. We try and do better.
You've spoken about the visual component of digital design, but obviously anything that is existing in the digital space also needs to actually work in a technical kind of a way. How do you guide your team in terms of that, and is that something that's part of your role?
You're completely right. Things obviously need to work, and I think this kind of ultimately comes down to the definition of design, which implies solving a problem. And addressing a particular need. It's not about just styling something in a nice way. It obviously has to work. What we do isn't like print design, where you're just designing something static. What we do actually lives and breathes, and a user has to actually engage with it. So it fulfills a particular function. So part of that is actually conceptualizing that journey and that experience before it actually lands on the desk of a designer. So interaction design is a field that we're also putting quite a bit of emphasis on, and we've got a team of interaction designers who are responsible for conceptualizing what this overall experience is actually going to be like. They do consult with designers, the visual designers, in generating ideas and trying to figure out what the best experience is actually going to be. But ultimately, they're responsible for making sure that the experience is actually going to work from a technical perspective, from a visual standpoint. They're responsible for kind of looking at the whole project from a 360-degree perspective and talking to the right people to make the experience as good as it possibly can be. And then the visual designers make it look amazing.
You've mentioned things like needing to make sure the brand is happy, needing to make sure that you achieve whatever the objectives are. Now it sounds like in Native we've got to worry about interactive design, we've got to worry about all the technical elements. Designers are frequently complaining that they're these people who have to answer to 1,000 different bosses, and how the heck are they actually supposed to make something creative and beautiful within that? Is that as much of a challenge as I'm making it out to be with my devil's advocate question, or is it actually pretty easy and manageable?
It's actually quite an easy question to answer. I think in the context of Native and where we're at, traditionally our designers have been responsible for coming up with the ideas, making them look great, making sure that they work technically, and pleasing a whole bunch of people who expect them to do just that. Whereas in Native, we have teams that are responsible for those various things. So the designers, much like my role is becoming a lot more focused, the visual designer's role is becoming a lot more focused in that they're getting a lot of input from the technical guys, they're getting a lot of input from the interaction designers, they're getting a lot of input from conceptual creatives. And what they've got to worry about is making sure that the thing really looks and works phenomenally.
When it comes down to Adam Whitehouse in 2011, you've got to be this executive creative director across 2 cities and 2 sets of offices. What does that mean for you, and how do you plan to deal with that?
Well, it means a lot of traveling, which is going to be interesting because there's a baby coming during the course of the next year, so that's going to be fun. But for the first half of the year, particularly before that happens, I will be spending every second week in Joburg. We've got quite a unique situation with the visual design team in that we have literally one person from every business coming together as part of a new team, and there's a very amazingly talented people coming together as part of that team, but they're completely different personality-wise, and I think it's going to be interesting seeing how that team gels. And obviously, my role is to make sure that actually happens and that everybody works well with one another, and that creative quality is maintained consistently across Joburg and Cape Town. A lot of agencies that exist in multiple cities are often known for varying creative outputs, and we want to make sure that there's absolute consistency across both cities. So there's going to be a challenge. It also comes down to processes and review structures and those kind of things. So apart from the traveling, there's going to be a lot of conference calls, a lot of video calls, and a lot of reviewing of work on a daily basis across cities anyway.
I'll ask another devil's advocate kind of question now, which is that in the digital space, it's a lot about measurement and conversion. So if that's what we're really doing, how important are design in a successful website or creating some kind of digital campaign? Do we even need it?
Yowza, I love that question. It's awesome. So, I was alluding to it earlier in that we're not just designing a poster that needs to grab someone's attention. Everything that we do needs to fulfill a particular objective. There's a business requirement for it. So, apart from having to look visually appealing, that goes without saying. Our designers aren't stylists. They're not just meant to put lipstick on a peg, for lack of a better phrase. They're meant to solve problems. The work that they do is to achieve a particular objective. So whether that objective is to get someone to click on a particular button, or fill out a form, or to go through an entire journey and be entertained, what they're doing is meant to fulfill some kind of objective. So the importance of design is paramount. It's huge.
And do you think the other committees or councils that exist within Native buy into that as well? They understand that you have to perform that role, and it might take however long it takes to crack it?
Completely. I think everybody's committed to creating an award-winning creative business, and creative crosses into a whole bunch of different disciplines, from the interactive design team to the entire technical team, to the conceptual creatives, to the visual designers, account and project managers, media. Every single department has bought into the vision of creating an award-winning creative agency. So it all does come down to the creative product at the end of the day, and we've got to make sure that we achieve that goal.
Adam, you mentioned awards and Native becoming an award-winning creative agency. Stonewall fared okay in this year's big awards, but it still lags behind Glue in terms of creative awards. Why is that, do you think, and what plans does Native have to edge up the rankings and beat the competition?
It's an awesome question. A sensitive one at that. Yeah, Glue and Stonewall traditionally have always kind of competed against one another quite aggressively when it comes to awards, and I think it's a great thing to actually talk about. I think what Glue does really well is they're great at coming up with ideas. I think Stonewall traditionally focused on execution a lot and didn't focus a lot on coming up with really good ideas and then executing them really well. So I think that's why we've lagged behind, and we have put a lot more energy into ideas, and I think that's why we fared better this year than we did last year, because it was something that was flagged and it's something that we poured a lot of effort into, and it is getting better. So in terms of the conceptual side of creative, we're getting there, and we're putting a lot of emphasis on that. And Glue definitely do the right things when it comes to coming up with those ideas and executing them properly. I also think what Glue do really well is they gear their work towards awards. So they'll take a project and they'll look at all the individual categories in an award, and they'll know that one really great project can win an award for an email, an award for a banner, an award for a microsite, and an award for a campaign, and an award for a Mobi site, and an award for something else, potentially something non-digital. And they'll throw a lot of energy at that and win a whole bunch of awards from one project, which is great. And I think what we've the kind of trap that we've fallen into from time to time is we'll throw a lot of energy into a microsite, for instance, and then we'll just tick the boxes with all of the other elements. So we'll do the banners for a campaign, and they'll be good and they'll get results, but they won't be award-winning concepts. Same thing for emails, same thing for the Mobi site. So, I think it's looking at every opportunity to win an award for a particular project, recognizing where there is opportunity to be really creative when it comes to the concept and the execution, and making sure that the final thing that goes live is true to the original idea. I think that also plays a big role.
You spoke about creative execution and the creative idea, and how in order to win these awards you need to have very strong creative ideas. Are we then saying that we run the risk of creative execution suffering?
Yes, you do. You do run that risk in a big way. Something that I've also noticed with some awards, not all of them, but most of them, is execution counts for quite a big portion of the award, but concepts, particularly when it comes to the advertising awards, is the biggest portion of that. Results, very small weighting. With bookmarks, it's obviously weighted a hell of a lot heavier. The concept needs to be great, but the execution needs to be 100% perfect, and there's often a big disparity between the two, and we've noticed it quite a bit. What we're trying to address in Native is that the team responsible for coming up with the idea stays attached to the project as it progresses into the studio and as it comes out the other end. So we really need to make sure that those people who are coming up with the ideas, the strategists and the creative lead, are the people who are overseeing the work as it progresses, to make sure that it comes out right.
We're speaking about awards, and it's probably worth contextualizing how much experience you have in that from the other side. So can you just run our listeners through all of the awards that you've judged in your relatively short but high-flying career?
All right, so I'm not going to talk about how it happened, because I really don't know. But it started in 2005. I'd just become the creative director of Stonewall back in the day when Ben and Jacques and I took the business over, and I got recommended by a colleague in another industry, who was also on one of the other panels at Cannes to judge the Cannes Lions, the cyber category. So that was kind of the thing that kicked it all off. I got invited to go over there, and that was just the most mind-blowing experience. All of the work that I'd looked up to that point, all of the international award-winning work, I was sitting alongside all of the creative directors responsible for that work, so it was mind-blowing, and I learned a lot from the experience. And it was also great to judge that work, because it's at that point that I realized that what actually wasn't about what the thing looks like. It's about what the idea was behind what it looks like. What was the actual concept? I think traditionally digital has been about just about producing stuff for the sake of it, and it is actually an advertising channel, and you can use it very effectively. So that was a big eye opener. From there, I got invited to judge the Lurries, which was great, and that's kind of been a consistent thing. I think I've judged it 5 times out of the last 6 years. And the One Show Awards in New York, I was invited to judge those in 2007, and that was also incredible. Again, sitting alongside the guys that I really look up to, like Nick Law from RGA. Absolutely amazing creative directors, very talented guys, and I learned a hell of a lot.
You mentioned one of the people who inspires you and you look up to, but who else do you admire in the international market and the local market, and why?
Internationally, RGA is definitely a big inspiration. I think what they've managed to do over the last few years has been phenomenal. They've managed to become the primary agency for a whole bunch of brands, really big international global brands, and I think for a digital agency, that's such a phenomenal milestone, and I think it's going to be a while before South Africa gets there, but it definitely shows where things are going, that a digital agency can be the lead agency for a brand. It really says a lot about where the world is going, and where advertising is going. So yeah, we look up to them. I have a great deal of respect for a whole bunch of international agencies besides RGA. There's AKQA, there's Goodby Silverstein, Weed & Kennedy. Those guys they absolutely clean up every single year. It's all of the international awards, and where they come up with their ideas, I actually do not know, because the stuff that comes out of their studio is just phenomenal and mind-blowing, and it's definitely a big inspiration for us. And locally, who I admire in the local industry, it's an interesting question, because to be honest, I don't spend a lot of time looking at local work and looking at our competitors and looking at other agencies here. I definitely look to the international market for inspiration. What I do appreciate about the local market is there are some very passionate niche agencies that do a real phenomenal job at what their particular niche is. I'm not gonna mention names, but I think it's worth noting that when a business throws all of its efforts at a particular thing, it can do phenomenally well with that. And I think our challenge as Native is to look at our individual teams and do just that within those niches, but at the same time make them gel really well. Because I've seen a lot of niche agencies try to become full service agencies and fail dismally, because their passion lies in the thing that they were really good at the start, and not in all the other new services and skills that they're trying to take on board. And I think that's where I think we're going to be really strong. Is we've got leaders in each field that absolutely love what they do, and really talented people in each field as part of those teams. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does, and I'm going to pick up on something that you mentioned there, which was talking about the South African people that you look at versus the international ones. If we take all of our influences creatively from global best practice or global award-winning work, does that mean we run the risk of being inappropriate in the South African context, whether it's from a bandwidth issue, a demographic issue, understanding how the market works locally?
I don't think so. I think the kind of inspiration that we take from international agencies is just in terms of the level of creativity that they throw at any particular challenge, and those are kind of global principles that we need to adopt. We need to think unconventionally. We need to create relationships between things that seem very unrelated. We need to. It's definitely something we need to put all of our energy into. I think where it becomes relevant for South Africa is that we need to understand context, and we're all consumers in the South African space, and that helps us apply what we learn from the international agencies and create relevance for it locally.
What design challenges are there now that there's so many different interfaces to design for? It used to be that we had to worry about getting things working on 2 different browsers. Now forget the browser problem. There are hundreds of different versions. There's big screen, there's small screen, there's the third screen. There are probably going to be iPad apps and other tablet apps that we're rolling out. It can't be that easy creatively or design-wise.
It's definitely not, and it's a consideration that's creeping into a lot of discussions at the start of projects. Usually what we do at the start of a project is try and define who's going to be accessing this thing and on what. And best case scenario is you get to custom design and custom develop something for each particular device and platform. More often than not, though, you've got a very limited budget, and you want to do the best with what you've got. So, I mean, it is a big challenge. I'm not going to lie. We are, a couple of the things that we're experimenting with these days is things like fluid layouts, because you don't know how wide you can actually design a page for anymore. When you're doing a website, you usually, you look at your market and you think, okay, cool, well, let's design to a screen resolution of X and we'll be good to go, rock and roll. And that's not the case anymore, because, a person might be accessing your website from an iPad or from their iPhone or from a BlackBerry. It's an absolute nightmare. I think what we are trying to do, though, and what we have done throughout our history is design to standards and develop to standards. So I think design for us is about not adding stuff just for design's sake. Every element that gets added to a particular thing is there for a reason, and it fulfills a function. And at the same time, technically, applying standards to the way we develop stuff means that things degrade gracefully and they don't look disgusting when they're accessed on a device that you didn't quite plan for. So yeah, it is definitely a big consideration. First prize, though, is obviously being able to design and execute for particular platforms, and it is something that's happening more and more. We are being approached by clients, and we are pushing clients to spend money on deploying projects to multiple devices and platforms.
I'm glad that you mentioned clients, because while you were answering that question, it occurred to me that the design challenges that you mentioned here mean a lot of time and a lot of, therefore, budget spent on working out how exactly to deploy things in many different media. Do clients understand that, and do they understand how much technical effort goes into doing that, or just how many iterations of something you have to produce in order to cover all the bases of the market they want to reach?
I think every client's different, but it all comes down to holding their hand and taking them through it. I think a huge percentage of our time isn't spent discussing requirements with clients. It's actually spent educating the clients and teaching them about what actually goes into the work that we do. It's a misconception that digital work doesn't take very long to produce, and we've spent years fighting for more and more budget, because the more time you spend on something, the better it comes out at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it all comes down to the educational side of things, and holding the client's hand and taking them through why it takes so long. But at the same time, it's also up to us to do what we do smartly. And technology is improving, and there are new things that are coming out all the time that allow you to deploy to multiple different platforms. So the onus is also on us to stay up to date and make sure that we're giving our clients value by using those latest standards and technologies.
You've touched on technology and different platforms and how those impact on design, but of course, especially in the web digital space, something that is a very real concern is how accessible things are by search engines, how well they're optimized, how well a whole lot of other data mechanisms can access something that you may have designed in a great way. How do you handle that kind of just straight up bits and bytes level of design work when you're trying to get your team excited about a visual execution?
It's not just about getting my team excited about a visual execution, it's about getting the whole project team talking to one another and excited. And I think the best creative comes out of having a very tight box that you're put within. So constraints are good. Constraints bring the most creative solutions out at the end of the day. I think throughout history, the most innovative stuff has come out of absolute necessity, not because someone had a lot of spare time and they were just buggering around. So constraints are great. We love them, and I think the designers appreciate that kind of stuff up front. And I think as long as everybody understands what those constraints are, we have fun within those constraints.
Everyone is talking about UX, this user experience thing. What does that mean, and how important is it?
Okay, it's another great acronym to add to the hundreds and hundreds of acronyms that we already use on a daily basis. But all it boils down to is it's the experience that you are taking the user on, the experience that you're giving the user. So everything that we do comes down to creating some kind of experience for someone. So whether it's a website experience or a banner or an email that someone is going to receive, that is an experience, or it should be an experience if we've done our job properly. That's for sure. So user experience is it's a definition and a term and now a discipline for something that we've always done. And as digital agencies, every other agency has always actually done UX as part of their process, whether they knew it or not. It's just now reaching a point where it has people who are dedicated to fulfilling that function, and people who actually look at what the brief is, what all the requirements are, and they turn that into something that is going to fulfill the objective, and they make it tangible. And then the visual designer comes in and gives it a look and feel, and gives it an overall treatment. The technology guys make sure that it actually works. So yeah, it is becoming a really big thing. In native terms, that role is part of the interaction designer's role. So instead of just calling it user experience, the interaction designer's responsibility is defining what that overall experience is going to be, also making sure that all the technical the technical side of that is going to be covered, and also making sure that they've spoken to all the relevant people who are going to have to make that experience come to life, and make sure that enough creativity has actually been injected into that experience.
Getting back to your role as someone who leads up a team and has to guide them as well as inspire them, certainly when you and I have had the privilege of working together in the Stonewall context, where each of us was wearing many more multidisciplinary hats, you inevitably get quite a robust debate between what the strategy demands and the usability demands are. I would be talking about a grid and certain sizes of font and the way things need to work and the demographic it needs to reach. And you would be talking from a creative side about how exactly we're going to make the thing look good and make anyone actually want to click on it or download it or whatever the case is. That tension is even greater now, I think, when you've got to worry about this UX thing, exactly how the interaction design is going to fit in. How do you face up to that challenge in 2011 and make the visual designers happy that they're working on things?
I think it all comes back to what I was saying earlier about that they can actually focus on what their primary passion is. I think it is going to be an interesting challenge in that the designer traditionally has been responsible for coming up with the overall user experience, and now there are dedicated people who are sort of wireframing that experience out and defining what it's going to be. But at the same time, they're going to be doing that as part of a team. So the visual designer is going to have a say, and ultimately it is all about collaboration. And the times that we've spent debating those things, they've always been healthy debates, and we've learned a lot from those experiences. So I think that's the exciting part. So I don't think it's going to create tension. I think it's going to create collaboration and healthy debate.
Adam, thank you very much for your time. I'll end off with a final question that has two parts, which is looking forward to 2011. I'd love to know what your dream job or dream project is, both for you as an individual, as creative director, and then also for the native visual design team.
I'm very excited about our work no longer just being seen on laptops and mobiles. I'm very excited about our work being seen in retail spaces and projected onto buildings and projected onto billboards and those kind of environments. And we've got a lot of opportunity coming up. So we've actually landed that dream project. We just got to make it happen. That's what's really exciting me, is seeing our work reach into new spaces, and not just be limited to digital laptops and phones and those kinds of devices. So that's what really floats my boat. And in terms of the native team, the visual design team, but also I think the overall creative team, I think the most exciting kind of project for them is quite a tight brief, but a brief that allows them to create a digitally led campaign that also lives in the real world. So a lot of the work that we're doing these days is starting to bleed into the real world, and a lot of campaign ideas need above the line creative and need below the line creative, which is quite interesting. So I think that's really exciting. a native perspective, and I think the ideal kind of project from our creative team's perspective is a brief that allows us to do just that and not be boxed into, we need a microsite and a banner campaign. Give us an idea for it. It's the brief that has a business challenge and gives us a blank canvas to work within, whether that's a digitally led campaign or whether it's something that lives in the real world. That's the exciting part.
Thinking Native is a part of the making of Native, a 4-month journey into the making of South Africa's newest full-service agency. For more insights with Native's leading thinkers, visit us on www.native.co today or follow us on @NativeSpeak.